Good evening, everybody. A good Chodesh. It's a new Jewish month tonight, the month of Tammuz. May it bring all the bracha that it promises to bring. Before we start the webinar this evening, I would like to mention that on Wednesday night is the 26th Yahrzeit of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. There is going to be a massive webinar starting at 7:30 p.m. So please look out for the WhatsApps and the Facebook ads. It's going to be a very special evening. So please make sure to join. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe had a vision. And the Rebbe's vision was that Mashiach should come. And when Mashiach comes, there'll be no more war, no more suffering, no more sadness. It's going to be a time where godliness is absolutely revealed in this world. Godliness will be absolutely revealed. In order to achieve that, the Rebbe sent emissaries throughout the world. Probably the hardest country of all, the most challenging country of all, is Russia. But in 1990, Rabbi and Rebbetzin Lazar became the first Lubavitcher emissaries in Russia. Rabbi Lazar has transformed Russian Jewry. And today he's probably one of the most powerful, he is one of the most powerful rabbis in the world who has done so much. So it's our very special honor to have Rabbi Lazar with us. And please, Rabbi Lazar, over to you.
Thank you, Rabbi Messinter. Since you mentioned the dream of the Rebbe, which I think is a dream of every Jew, that Mashiach should come. So let me share with you a small story that I heard from a Chassid that grew up here in the Soviet Union. And as a child, he asked his father, can you explain to me what will the world look like when Mashiach is going to come? He always heard Mashiach, Mashiach, we have to ask for Mashiach. So he wanted to know what will the world look like when Mashiach is going to come. So his father told him that when Mashiach is going to come, you'll be able to walk on Red Square and your tzitzis will be hanging out. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a day when you, not only when you're home behind closed doors and we close all the window shades and then you can take out your tzitzis. Imagine walking on Red Square with your tzitzis out. That's Mashiach. And this same chassid came back to Russia to visit a few years ago, and he saw how hundreds of kids are standing on Red Square and singing Shema Yisrael, of course with their tzitzis out and their yarmulke out. And he said, tell me, isn't this already the times of Mashiach? So yes, we're still waiting for Mashiach, but we believe that what happened in Russia is surely one of the big signs that we are much, much closer to this day. That if the Soviet Union can turn around the way it did and become a place where today you have synagogues, schools, kindergartens, you name it, you have it. Probably more kosher restaurants in Moscow than in Johannesburg. And Jewish life is thriving is surely a sign that something is changing, something is happening, and we are very, very close to that day of Mashiach's coming. But as I say, let me start from the beginning, and this will also, hopefully also make you understand what Rabbi Messinter did for me and why I agreed to join this webinar today. So I was born in Italy, Milan, Italy. That's where the Rebbe sent my parents on shlichus 60 years ago. At that time, Italy wasn't what it is today. And my parents went there to try to rebuild Yiddishkeit, to bring education in Italy. And today, Baruch Hashem, Milan, Italy is a thriving Jewish community, growing, exciting and everything. But when I was born, my grandparents actually, who lived then in the States, believed that who knows if this child is going to even remain Jewish. That's how little Judaism was around Italy then. Of course, there was no yeshiva there. So when I was ready bar mitzvah, and even before that and after that, my dream was always to go and be able to go somewhere to learn in a regular yeshiva. Little did I know what it means to leave home, to leave the warmth of your home, your parents. Anyways, I ended up, and this was the Rebbe's advice, to go learn in New York. And I traveled to New York and I went to this yeshiva the yeshiva Tomchet Mimim on Ocean Parkway. Of course, I got there, an Italian boy, speaks almost no English, no friends, knows no kids in the class. And of course, I came there and I was a little lost, to say the least. I was very, very lucky that in that yeshiva, there was a program, young boys who were shluchim to help the younger students to learn, to bring some special vitality in the learning, some excitement. And one of these special students was actually Rabbi, and then he wasn't a rabbi, then was David Mesinter. I remember him, and I think his chavrusa was Yossi Katz. And I remember them as two warm South African boys who came and really cared for each one of us. And I could say especially I felt the care and the concern of a boy that came, who knows, out of this little community in Italy, and wasn't part of the gang, wasn't part of all the other students, but they gave me a lot of attention, support, learned with me, and I'll always remember the care and the support that I had from them. So this is my connection with Rabbi Mesinter. He asked me, I think a few times, to come visit South Africa. It still didn't happen, but thank God to Zoom, I can at least join your beautiful community today here on Zoom, and I hope this is going to be a preparation for our visit, our meeting, hopefully, as they say, face to face, hopefully very soon. So to move forward a little, I'm learning in New York, went from one class to the other class. Eventually, I reached the yeshiva in 770, which was the ultimate goal of every student then, to learn in the Rebbe's yeshiva. And of course, being there, I was watching how some chassidim that came out of Russia would arrive to the Rebbe, be there by the Farbrengens, and they themselves used to sometimes lead a Farbrengen, and see these special Jews who grew up and were able to keep Yiddishkeit alive in the Soviet Union. And I always had this dream that one day maybe I'll be able to go and see what life is actually in the Soviet Union. Not only watching this chassidim that came out of Russia, but what does life there really look like? We used to hear all different kinds of stories, anecdotes, but to see it with your own eyes for sure would make a big impression on me. That's what I thought, and I always had this dream. And thank God, one day I was approached and I was asked, are you ready to go teach in the Soviet Union? Are you ready to go travel there for a month and a half and teach in what was called then the Yeshiva on Wheels? Why was it called the Yeshiva on Wheels? Because there was no way that you could establish a regular yeshiva in those days. But you could have one day people would gather in one apartment, another day in a different place, a third day in another apartment. Every day would be somewhere else, not to be caught by the authorities. Would you be able to go and teach in this kind of yeshivas? Of course, I jumped at the opportunity. I said, of course, I'm ready. Tell me what I have to do. And of course, we had to get the special blessing from the Rebbe. And eventually, we landed in Moscow. Of course, we were dressed up like just young kids, a cap, a sports jacket, nothing looking like a rabbi. But nevertheless, by the border, of course, they realized right away who we are. They checked our suitcases, went through every item that we were trying to bring into Russia, whether it was books or tefillin or a knife to make a bris milah. Anything we brought in was classified, and they said, if anything you won't bring out, if you're going to leave everything here, we're not going to let you out of the country. In other words, whatever we were bringing in, we were able to use for our own need, but no way can we do propaganda, teaching, spreading the message of Yiddishkeit in those days in the former Soviet Union. So, but finally they let us through. Long story, how we got to the hotel, from the hotel, how we started meeting the local Jews. I don't think tonight we have enough time to tell all these stories, but in a nutshell, what I really saw is not only God-fearing Jews, not only Jews that were able to learn Torah, and in order to learn, they were ready to risk their job and their well-being and everything, were Jews, and that's what impressed me the most, that in order to help another Jew, they were ready to risk everything. They were ready to go, what we call Mesirut Nefesh, self-sacrifice, just to help one more Jew, whatever the need is going to be. If somebody has to have kosher food, they're going to risk whatever they have in order for this person to get the kosher food. If that person is in jail, they're going to risk their well-being and bring the food to this person in jail. If they have to print Jewish books, so there was a young man who had a very small apartment. He turned one room into a dark room. The whole day he used to stand and take pictures of pages of these Sfarim, of these books, and at night he would sit there and develop these pictures. If he would get caught, that would be the end. He would be sent to Siberia for life, never would see his family again. Every single day he used to stand there for hours, developing these pictures and giving them out to people so people should have some books. Of course, bringing in books was impossible. As I mentioned before, it was very, very hard, very difficult. So people learned actually from these pictures. Somebody else was in charge of making brisson to people. So somebody would come over to him. He used to work in the market, and people would know that this is the person you can turn to. They would tell him, I want to have a bris. And he would tell them, okay, meet me at this and this corner, at this time, in 3 days. They would get him into a car, blindfold him, bring him to a place that he should never know where it took place, and they would have a bris. And of course, he might be a setup, might be a KGB agent. You never knew. This person needs to risk his life day after day in order to help people have a bris. And these stories were every day. It was, again, more and more shocking to see how these people could have kept Yiddishkeit for themselves. They wanted to keep Shabbat. They wanted to keep eating kosher themselves. Nobody bothered them. But what they were doing, they were risking their life to help one more person get closer to Yiddishkeit. Whether it was inviting them to their home, teaching their children, which was completely against the law. But they did it day after day as if this is the most self-understood, no other way. This is our way of life. Of course, I was extremely, extremely touched by these people, and I realized that these people are really real heroes in our days. No, who knows, like, who do we expect it to be heroes? These are really people that are ready to give up their life because of their belief. And I remember the last day when I was ready to go back to the States after a month and a half of teaching them from morning to night. Was the most exciting experience, was actually teaching these people, because their thirst for Yiddishkeit was so strong. They so much wanted to learn, so much wanted to know. They had these deep questions, and they didn't stop. 24/7 they were. I remember once walking into the metro, the subway, and seeing one of these people that was coming to a class with his Talmud open in the middle of the subway. In those days, somebody should open up a Talmud in the subway. It was like crazy, but their thirst was incredible. Anyways, I'm leaving back to New York, and the night before I left back, they all came together for a Verbringen, sort of to say goodbye. And at that moment it was practically clearly that we're going to say goodbye to each other probably forever. They would never be able to leave Russia. Who knows if I'll ever be able to come back. So it was really sort of a goodbye party. At that time it was still the Soviet Union. This is 1987 with all the restrictions. They never dreamed that one day the doors are going to open up. They never dreamt that they're going to see me again. Anyways, and I tell them, listen, I want to tell you one thing. I'm not going to forget about you. Not only am I not going to forget about you, I'm going to do whatever I can once I come back to New York to tell your story, to tell people what is going on, that people should be able to help you, and you should at least get the basic needs that you must have, whether it was medicines or certain foods or books. They always said, the more thing we need is books. Forget about medicine, forget about kosher food. Just send us some books, some tefillin, some mezuzahs. Anyways, I told them I'm going to do my utmost best to help you. And one young man stood up and said, Rabbi Lazar, please don't promise. We know you're going to get back to New York, you're going to get back to yeshiva, you're going to be busy again with your own things, and you're going to do whatever you have to do. We are here. God is going to help. Don't promise that you're going to help us. I said, what do you mean don't promise they're going to help? He said, many people came here, promised they're not going to forget about us. Sadly, they left and went back to their own things, and we fully understand. We don't expect the world Jewry to keep on thinking of us. And at that point, something really, I would say, like deep inside me got hurt. And I said, how could it be that these are probably the Jews, the most suffering Jews, like we used to call them, the silent Jews. Nobody even hears their voice. Nobody knows their plight. Nobody knows what they're going through. And when you tell them they were going to try to help you, they already gave up on people helping them. They don't even have a hope that the world is really listening and really ready to do something to help them out. And I told them, listen, I heard what you said, but I promise I'm going to go back to New York and I'm going to think of you. And that's what I tried to do when I came back to New York. I remember in yeshiva, then there was a joke that I'm not going to get married because I already found my fiancée. Her name is Russia. And I was really, really passionate to help these Jews. Wherever I went, I spoke to people. I said, we have to help them. We have to make their life better. They won't be able to leave. They won't ever be able to have a regular, decent community life. But whatever we can, we should do to help them. And I was able to go back again and again as a young student. I went back a few times till after I got married. Actually, when I met my future wife, one of the first questions that I asked her was, would you be considering going to Russia? The Soviet Union at that time was like not even possible in a dream to move to Russia. But her answer was, wherever the Rebbe will send us, that's where we're going to go. And that's it. We got engaged practically an hour later. I'm joking. We met a few more times, but I knew that this is the right person for me. If she's ready to go to Russia and she's ready to give up good life in the United States and do whatever we need to do.
Rabbi Lazar?
Yes.
Your sound seems to have gone off for a second. Just check that you're not muted.
I'm not muted. Do you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, we Baruch Hashem got married. A year later, we were lucky that the Rebbe chose us to become his emissaries to Russia, to the Soviet Union at that time. And we came to Russia. The situation here was terrible. As Rabbi Messinter mentioned, it was 1990. At that time, there were just lines for everything. There was no food, nothing to be found. People were going hungry. The country was falling apart. Of course, already Jews had permission to leave to Israel, so everybody was leaving. And we, like people said, everybody's leaving. All of a sudden, you come here, what are you doing here? We are all leaving. And we used the famous line that Lubavitcher Shliach is the one that's going to turn off the light when everybody leaves. But until then, as long as there's going to be one Jew left in Russia, we're going to try to see what we can do to help them. And our main job in those days was actually preparing people to make Aliyah, to move to Israel, whether it was having a chuppah before they would go to Israel, so they would come to Israel already married according to the Jewish law, or teaching them Hebrew, or preparing them when they're going to come to Israel. But the local community here was actually, I would say, falling apart. People didn't even believe that there's any hope in the future and anything is going to happen in this country. This country is like for the birds, everything is falling apart. But the Rebbe sent us here, so we knew we have a mission here in Russia. And as long as there's going to be one Jew left, we're going to help him. Whether it's building Jewish schools, kindergartens, yeshivot, Jewish universities, cultural programs, synagogues, community centers, social programs, humanitarian help, which is greatly needed. And of course, today, 30 years later, we look back and we say, wow, who would have believed that this would have been possible? Today, we have a community, very, very strong community, not only in Moscow, but actually in Russia itself. You have in 200 cities, communities with Chabad Shluchim, Siberia, the Far East, the most remote places. You have to fly 9-10 hours to reach there. There's a shliach there who has rebuilt the whole community. Again, all a mikveh, kosher restaurant, kindergartens, you name it, a school. And all this is actually, no question, a huge miracle. Nobody would have believed this would have been possible. Today, hundreds of thousands of Jews have come out of the closet saying we are Jewish. Today you are proud to be Jewish. It's cool to be Jewish. People finally are looking into archives to prove their Jewishness. In the past, people used to hide their Jewishness from their passports and everything. Today, it's exactly the other way around. To tell you what is going on today in Russia, I need a few hours. But of course, as Rabbi Mesinta asked me to say what's going on with anti-Semitism, so that is probably a good sign of what is the situation here. Actually, we are much better off than in many, many countries in the world, surely better off than Europe. Today, to walk on the streets with a hat, with a Magen David, with tzitzis outside, you have no problem. Middle of the night, people are going to come over to you and say, the Jews are amazing, Israel is amazing, but the connection between Russia and Israel, Netanyahu and Putin, we are actually quite involved in all these meetings and everything that is going on. It's amazing how much Russia has been helping Israel. As President Putin told me in the last meeting we had, can you believe that the elite are part of the Russian army is watching the borders of Israel, making sure that there won't be any attack from Syria? The best of our soldiers are actually today taking care of the well-being of the Israelis. And he says, imagine Russia, what is Russia doing for Israel? And of course, what Russia is doing for the Jewish community. We have here, Baruch Hashem, probably one of the largest and best Jewish museums in the world, a very interactive museum, which was built thanks to the efforts of President Putin, and many, many other programs. Returning synagogues that were confiscated to the communism era. Today, we're giving back to the community and rebuilt. And you see, the main thing I would say is the young people. We have thousands and thousands of young people which are involved in community activities, voluntary work, learning, classes. It's really something that nobody would imagine, walking into any university and seeing a Jewish club, programs for them. And these young people are the ones from the most active. Since Rabbi Mesinta asked me to say a few words about what's going on today with COVID and the coronavirus. So the community here, thank God, is doing very well. We're being very, very careful. Everybody's still at home. Synagogues aren't open yet, but we are bringing the Jewish life into every Jewish home. Every Friday, we bring packages, Shabbos in a box to the people, wine, chales, literature, Jewish songs, and of course, food for Shabbat, that in each home, there should be a small synagogue. Opening up what we say, a Bet Chabad in every Jewish home, that everybody should have a Shabbat table. So these young kids are the ones that are going out, making sure that every single Jew should get such a package. Sometimes they come to a home and the old person, behind the door is asking them, please help me get a medicine. And they'll go out to the drugstore for him. These young people that we never believed they would be so outgoing and so active, not only in their own Jewishness, but actually helping others, taking, even risking to go out and helping these elderly people at home, they are doing it today. So in a way, it's like a deja vu, again, seeing this Russian soul from Russia with love, really seeing these young people doing whatever they can to keep the community alive, getting involved. And this, I would say, is our pride. And we have big, big plans for the future. The main thing I want to tell all of you, each one of you, please come visit us. It would be a great, great honor to host you here in Russia. We hope very soon we'll have direct flights from Johannesburg to Russia, and you'll be able to come see what is going on here. The miracle that the Rebbe dreamt of. We said in the beginning, the Rebbe dreamt of Mashiach, and that was his dream. The Rebbe also dreamt that one day Russian Jews are going to be free. And the Rebbe cried and begged and prayed for them. And at Farbrengen, the Rebbe always used to say, let's say l'chaim, that these Jews one day are going to be able to celebrate their Jewishness. It's going to be something exciting, not only suffering because of their Jewishness. Today, for Russian Jews, this is the case. People are celebrating their Jewishness like never before. They're excited about their Jewishness, excited about Shabbat, excited about learning, excited about coming to the synagogue. It's one of I love this community. I love the people here. They've made turnarounds in their life. They've changed completely their lives. They've become involved from 0 to 100 in a very short period. Their families, their kids, their parents, all of them are becoming part of this beautiful community, and it's growing. And we hope that this crisis, this coronavirus, is just going to build us even stronger, better, and we're going to have a even closer, close-knit, a united Jewish community and together we're all going to go to meet and greet Mashiach very soon. I was asked to leave some time for questions and answers, so
one or two questions have come in. First question is the size of the Jewish community in Russia. Let's start with that.
So that's actually the million-dollar question. I don't know who asked this question, but if you could help us solve this question, would be great. The Rebbe always said, when he spoke about Russian Jewry, that there are millions and millions of Jews. We have to understand that Russia is not only 70, 80 years of communism and of suffering. The suffering has been going on for the last few centuries. It was never, ever easy for a Jew to be a Jew here. So Jews always suffered because of Judaism. It says, one lady once told me, she said, my grandmother got married to a non-Jew because she didn't want her kids to suffer as much as she did. My mother got married to a non-Jew because she didn't want her kids to suffer. And of course it didn't help. And it said, I got married to a non-Jew because I didn't want my kids to suffer. And today, finally, my kids are actually excited about being Jewish. So you have people, assimilation here hasn't been just, because you weren't religious, so you assimilated. People specifically tried to hide their Jewishness. They didn't tell their kids that they are Jewish. That's how bad it was here. So assimilation here is crazy. And today we have many different programs. One of them is through DNA and going into archives and trying to trace family trees to help people improve their Jewishness. It's not easy, but we have thousands and thousands and thousands of people knocking on our door and saying, I want to prove my Jewishness. Of course, it helps them to be able to go to Israel, to get an Israeli passport. It helps them to be part of this amazing community. And that's why we have to be extremely careful. But today we know that there's at least 1 million Jews in Russia. An example, now during the coronavirus, we made a special program of humanitarian aid, specifically targeted to Jews. Any Jew can turn to us and get help through this time, getting food at home. We have distributed tons and tons and tons of food. And in order to get people also connected to the community. So we're looking for them. We're looking for these 1 million+ Jews. We know probably today in the community, people that we know their home address and their phone numbers and know them, it's probably, we know over 300,000, but we believe there's at least double of that. At least there's 1 million Jews in Russia, but who knows how many more. That's our job. Our job is to find them, make them understand that it's time to come out of the closet, come back home, and we are there waiting for them.
Unbelievable, 1 million Jews. How many Chabad shluchim, how many Chabad rabbis and rebbitzins are scattered throughout Russia?
So in Moscow, we have 126 Chabad shluchim, and in Russia, we have another 60, probably 70 shluchim. Now, just you should understand what it means. It means that each shliach that goes out in a city in Russia is actually in the wilderness. He's there alone, and he has to rebuild the whole community, and he has to take care of his own community, and then small satellite communities around him, which smaller cities. Hopefully, very soon, we'll have at least one Chabad shliach in every one of the 200 cities in Russia where there is a Jewish community. It's a tough job because moving out to these cities is not easy. But today we have young boys and girls that got married, born in Russia, became Balei Tshuva. They learned in yeshiva. He became a rabbi. She learned in our seminary. And they're going out. These young people are going out to these cities, which is unbelievable to see these young boys and girls that grew up knowing nothing about Yiddishkeit. And eventually they became so involved, and today they're themselves becoming shluchim in these far remote communities that you can't even believe that somebody will move there to live. The only religious Jew, the only religious family, and eventually around them, the whole community is rebuilt. So today in Russia itself, you have over 200 families, close to 200 families probably, but we see it growing every day more and more.
So somebody just pointed out that there's a South African rabbi and rebbitzin in Siberia.
Rabbi Kirsch.
Rabbi Kirsch.
Yes, of course, in Chelyabinsk. He's doing an amazing, amazing work, his wife, and I visited the community. Unbelievable, unbelievable. I could tell you, I could even sit today now for a few hours, just tell you what goes on in Chelyabinsk, in this city, which is not easy. how we got back the synagogue, how we rebuilt it, and the school there, and everything that is going on in the community, and the people there, the Baalei Teshuvos, and the work is really incredible.
And people would like to know as follows. After 70 years of communism, what was the level of Jewish learning by the average person?
So you had the, let's call them the refusnik, the activists, the underground community, which was existing through communism, at least in the 70s, the 80s. All this happened thanks to the Hasidim that stayed back in Russia. We all know that all Jewish leaders at that time said, let's say we have to run out. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said, we can't live here. There's no future for our children. The only ones that remained were actually the Hasidim. Not only they remained because they couldn't go out, of course they could have left also, because they knew that that's what the Rebbe wanted. And I remember coming here to Russia and getting attacked. How could the Rebbe even tell people to stay here in Russia? This is craziness. This doesn't make sense. But these people stayed here and they built a whole underground community. Of course, the numbers were very small because everything you did, you had to be extremely careful. Once a rabbi from America came to visit Russia and he met the chief rabbi here. At that time, he was, of course, a KGB agent. And the rabbi started asking him different questions. And the rabbi said, this guest from America said, I was told that every second person in Russia, in the Soviet Union, is a KGB agent. So me and you speaking to each other, there's a big chance that one of the two of us is an agent. So let's stop right now. You couldn't trust the rabbi in the synagogue. You couldn't trust the gabbai. You couldn't trust anybody. People were afraid to walk into synagogues. Not too long ago, we found in the archives of the KGB a report of a secret meeting that took place in an apartment in Russia. 4 people were there. And the meeting starts, and this is what's written down as the minutes of the meeting. The meeting starts saying that the one person speaks up and says, here we can finally talk openly. The 4 of us, we can trust each other, so now we can say really what's going on. Not like when we meet in the synagogue or whatever. These were 4 people that believed that they can share secrets, and the KGB had a full report of every word that was said at that meeting. So people were really, really scared in those days. People didn't know, so the amounts, of course, wasn't so big, but you always had in each city at least one Chabad Chassid who took care of the needs, whether it was a bris or arranging that there should be a lulav and esrog or bringing in matzah. Somehow they managed. Of course, it was again risking their lives, but the numbers were very, very small. The vast majority of Jews here had no knowledge of Yiddishkeit whatsoever. I'll just share with you a small story. When the first time I came to Russia, I went into a taxi, and the taxi driver turned to me and he says, "Are you Jewish?" I said, "Actually, I am." So he says, "I have a question." So I asked him, "Okay, before you ask me the question, I want to ask you, are you Jewish?" He says, "Actually, I am." So he's, "Okay, so now ask the question." He said, "Can you tell me, why do we need to eat matzah?" So I told him, "Why do we need to eat matzah?" And I started telling the whole story of going out of Egypt and they didn't have time for the dough to rise and all of that. He said, "But why matzah?" I told you the story. He said, "But why do we need to put in the blood of these non-Jewish children in the matzah?" This is a Jew, 1987, and he still believed they were putting in blood in the matzah. So the propaganda here of anti-Semitism, government anti-Semitism, was huge. Jews were suffering, and they were forced to put in their papers and their birth certificates and passport the nationality as Jewish. And they were targeted because of that. They couldn't get a job, they couldn't get an education. They suffered because of it. So Jews here did whatever they can to change their names. Those that, whether it was changing their name, their nationality, hiding their Jewishness, not telling, of course, not forget about neighbors. Their own children shouldn't find out that their parents are Jewish. So the situation here was what we call amaratzus, no knowledge whatsoever. People knew zero of Yiddishkeit. And everything had to be more or less rebuilt from the scratch. There were no synagogues. They were all closed down, confiscated, turned into theaters, bakeries, warehouses, you name it. They destroyed any symbol of Judaism. Everything was just, and anything left was the Shalom Aleichem, atheism. If you would teach your children about God, that's it. Who knows what would happen to you? So people here really not only suffered, but they were denied, their essence. And when we came, again, as I mentioned before, by these young people, there was this big thirst, but the numbers were very small. Our job was actually to show Jews you can be proud of your Jewishness, you can be happy, you can be excited, and you don't have to hide it. So I remember the first time we put a small ad in the paper, it must have been this big, like 3 lines. We're going to have a Sukkot event in the synagogue. And we thought nobody will ever see this ad. It's like, you know, sort of in the bottom of the page. Anyways, that morning I came into the synagogue and the elderly people wanted to kill me. They said, are you crazy? There's going to be a pogrom in the synagogue. What are you doing? Going to bring people to the synagogue? Everybody's going to come here. Who knows? They're going to kill us all. That was the fear and the scare. When we wanted to build a Hanukkah menorah and put it in the center in Red Square, people thought that we completely lost it. They said, this is not America. This is not the Western world. We are in the Soviet Union. But we managed to put up a menorah. And actually, till today, the first night of Hanukkah, there's not one person in the country that doesn't know what Hanukkah is. Became a holiday of celebration of Jewish pride that you could put up a menorah on Red Square. So, of course, you know, people were so scared. They were so afraid. They were so ashamed of their Judaism. And to change it around and make it exciting, you know, there's nothing better than a Shabbat. No better food than kosher food. It's the best. It's the healthiest. It's the, you know, best priced. And the same about everything. The community centers are the best, top of the line places. You walk in, you feel like in a 5-star hotel, best everything. Because we have to make Yiddishkeit something exciting for the people here. They suffered long enough. Now it's time to celebrate their Jewishness.
Unbelievable. Just 1 or 2 more questions because we're running out of time. You said that anti-Semitism is low in Russia. So Frank Davidson has asked, when was the turning point?
The turning point, I think, was when we opened our community center here in Russia. In general, let me tell you in short, we had a synagogue, the Marina Russia Synagogue, was a landmark because this was the only synagogue built under communism. In 1993, anti-Semites burnt it down. We rebuilt a small center next to it, something temporary, and was bombed twice. And by miracles, nobody got hurt. But there was anti-Semitism here was rampant. People walking the streets being attacked. People coming into synagogue with a knife trying to kill people. It was crazy. It was the Wild West. This was in the 1990s. But we decided we're going to rebuild the synagogue. As the elderly people then said they can burn their bricks, they can burn their wood, but they can't burn our soul. Our soul is there. We're going to rebuild stronger, bigger. We decided to build this community center. People thought that we are out of our minds. Everybody's leaving to Israel, and we are building this 7th-floor huge center. We said we're going to build it. They're going to come. Anyways, miraculously, it's a long story, but the opening we set up for Chai Elul, the 18th of September, 2000. We didn't even know if we'll manage to build it, manage to open it on time, but we decided that that's going to be the opening day. 3 months earlier, President Putin was elected as the president of Russia, and one of the first places that he came to visit was actually the opening of this community center. That was the turning point. Nobody believed that a Russian president will ever come to a synagogue. Nobody believed that you could have the president of the country participating in a Jewish event. And all of a sudden, there were 30,000 people in the streets. And the police had to stop. They couldn't let people in anymore. They said security and everything. And the president came and he spoke and he said, we're going to make a change. We know why Jews left, because there was no Jewish education. There was no choice. We're going to give the Jews here an opportunity to live here as Jews. Of course, if they want to leave, they can leave. But if they want to stay, they should be able to live as Jews. And that was truly the turning point. People said we used to walk in the streets with our head down, hiding our Jewishness. Today, we are finally able to lift up our eyes and look straight at people and say, I am Jewish. The president came to synagogue. I'm also going to go to a synagogue. So if you're looking for a turning point, that was surely the miraculous moment, the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. That was really a moment that made a change here in Russia for the Jews.
And Roland Koppel is asking, apparently he's visited your shul. Roland Koppel from Johannesburg is asking, please tell us a little bit more about your relationship with President Putin.
How many hours do we have?
We actually have 7 minutes left, 8 minutes left.
So it's very hard to, in a nutshell, to say the relationship, but I don't think it's about me. I think it's about the Jewish community, the Jews. I'm sure many of you heard the story of, which I heard from him actually when he was still prime minister. He told me the story of how, as a young child, he grew up in a communal apartment. In the Soviet Union, they used to take these big apartments, divide them into 5, and 5 families to move in into an apartment, share the same kitchen, the same restroom, and they all lived in one room. So he lived in such an apartment. They were a very poor family, and next door to him was this Hasidic family who practically adopted him because his parents were very poor. They used to work till very late at night. Each one had 2 jobs. So they used to feed him every day, help him with his homework, take him to stores for when they went out shopping. And he remembers the Friday night at the table. He remembers eating gefilte fish. He remembers this father sitting, like he says, taking this cover over his head and praying for a few hours under this big cover. And then sitting down at the Shabbat table. And after finishing the meal, taking out a Talmud and sitting there for hours and learning. He said he never saw love as much as he saw in this family. Husband and wife caring for each other. He said there was an example of like purity in this family that he never saw again. And nobody then knew that this young child is going to become the president of Russia. But before that, when he was vice mayor in St. Petersburg, he heard that the Minister of Education doesn't want to give permission to open a Jewish school. We were trying to open a Jewish school, and the mayor wasn't giving permission. The Minister of Education, sorry. So he asked to bring in the papers, and he called the Minister of Education, and he asked him, why don't you give him permission? He said, listen, I'm Jewish. If I'm going to give permission for the Jews to open the Jewish school, they're going to say, because you're Jewish, that's why you're giving permission for the Jews to open the school. So I took the papers, the Prime Minister Putin tells me at that time, and I signed the papers for a Jewish school to open up. That was the way I paid back this Jewish family for what they did for me. So no question that it started already then. You think, no, you never know who you're going to help. David Mesinter, as a young boy, helped a young kid that came to yeshiva. He didn't think one day we're going to be on Zoom from South Africa to Russia. And this family helped this young kid risking their life to, as Jews, to celebrate their Jewishness and show it to their neighbor. They were risking their life because if this kid would tell his parents and his parents would be KGB agent, it would be over. But actually they did it, and that's the effect that it had. That till today, I don't think he has, anything unique towards the Jews, but surely he has no anti-Semitic feelings the other way around. He respects what the Jews stand for. He has helped Israel incredibly. One day, if Bibi will write his biography and he's going to tell the real story of the help that he received from Russia in these last years is unbelievable. Stories that have never been told. People are all looking for the bad side of the story. What Israel has received from Russia, I would say, is unprecedented, surely, but it's about also the Jewish community. As I've said before, he was proud enough and strong enough to come out to a synagogue, which was something that never happened in history. That a president of Russia, Soviet Union, should come to a Jewish event was unheard of. People were standing and crying. You see the video of people just, their tears coming down. It was like a dream come true. But this is because one family decided to help one young boy, and you never know the effect of doing something good for one person. You don't even know who this person is. He might be a young kid. What is he going to turn to be tomorrow? And of course, today we have constantly meetings. We discuss the situation in the Jewish community, many different issues that come up. We have meetings hours long. I'll just share with you one story, which I think it says a lot. It was actually Erev Rosh Hashanah, and I had a long meeting with him, and it was a very tough day. To make a long story short, the meeting is over. He's already standing by his desk. I'm walking out of the room, and he turns to me and he says, Rebbe, I have a question. And then okay, please. I felt that the meeting was already over. He says, I have a question. So I tell him, please. So he says, can you tell me the secret of the survival of the Jewish people? He says, we had so many nations, nationalities here in this country that disappeared completely. There's nothing left of them. Zero left. They had, rich nations, territory, culture, language. They had everything, and they're gone. And the Jewish people, without a land, without a language, without culture, and they're still around. What is the secret of the Jewish people? And I realized that whatever I'm going to say is going to be bad. If I'm going to tell them that we are unique, it means that the Russians are not unique. If I'm going to tell them that we are not unique, what? How could I say we are not unique? Of course we are unique. So what do we answer such a question? What is the secret of the Jewish people when you're standing in front of the Russian president? So I turned to him and I told him, Vladimir Vladimirovich, maybe you have an answer to this question. He says, actually, I've been thinking about this a lot. He says, I think that the reason is because all these nations were founded on temporary values. Money, army, territory, language, culture, it's all temporary, it comes and goes. The Jewish people are based, their foundation is eternal values. And he tells me, the Torah, the Jewish family, and the rabbis. He says, these are eternal values, so the Jewish people are going to be eternal. As long as these family values are there, as long as the teaching of the Torah and the rabbis are there, the Jewish nation is going to survive for eternity. So this is, can you imagine a Russian president saying these words about the Jewish community? So I think it says a lot about what he feels about the Jews and the miracle that has happened in this country.
Rabbi Lazar, absolutely fascinating. I'd like to conclude because we're running out of time. People, this has been enthralling. I'm going to ask you just to give us closing remarks on how all of us watching your webinar can do something to bring about Mashiach's arrival. But before that, I want to thank you very much. Before your closing remarks, because we're going to close with you, I want to thank you very much for making the time. And I once again want to remind everybody that Wednesday evening is a Farbrengen, is a big webinar in honor of the Rebbe's 26th Yotzat. But once again, thank you, Rabbi Lazar. Closing remarks to you.
So I think that we have a lesson from the Rebbe. The Rebbe has actually taught each one of us that, the famous words of Rabbi Sachs, the Rebbe didn't create followers, the Rebbe created leaders. The Rebbe is telling each one of us, you are a leader. If you think that Rabbi Messinter and many other rabbis, including myself, became who we became because we had something inside of us, our DNA was made to become a shliach, no, that's not the way it works. When we went out and we decided we're going to do this, we all of a sudden got amazing inspiration from people like you. By giving to others, we learned so much more. And by starting to do something to help somebody else, teach somebody else, you yourself grow and you get your inside powers that really become revealed, and you realize how much more you can do. And this is the message that the Rebbe tells each one of us. Each one of you is a leader. Don't sit back. Don't watch the rest of the world doing things. Don't watch the rabbi doing things. Become proactive. Affect the life of one more Jew. There's nothing better in life than helping somebody else. There's no better feeling when somebody comes over to you and tells you, Rabbi, you should know you made my life better. You changed my life. You helped me with this. You gave me the advice. So I think that the Rebbe is turning to each one of us and telling each one of us, you can do more in affecting other people. Reach out to somebody. Call, pick up the phone today, whether it was somebody you didn't speak to for a long time because you had a quarrel, a disagreement, whether it was somebody that you forgot about. Ask him, how are you doing? How's everything? How can I help you? Don't forget, let's do something special, especially as was mentioned that this Thursday is going to be Gimel Tammuz, to bring the Rebbe Nachas, to make Hashem happy from us, to bring the world closer to Mashiach. We have to bring an end to this craziness of this world. The coronavirus is just one more reminder. We have to get out of this craziness and get ready to coming with the Mashiach. How do we do that? When we become proactive helping somebody else. So let's say each one of us is going to say, I'm going to bring one more Jew closer to Yiddishkeit. I'm going to reach out to one more person and make sure that he feels connected, that he feels cared for, that I really care for his well-being materially and spiritually. And this is surely going to bring Mashiach closer.
Rabbi Lazar, thank you so much. And a good Chodesh, everybody. May you be blessed with a very special month. And we should have in this month the revelation of Mashiach. Thank you.
Amen. All the best.